the muscles to lead a great creative team are somewhat distinct from the muscles of being a great senior creative. You need to be an amazing kind of coach. You need to really care a lot about people. You need to not always sort of have your own problems and your own needs first when you're working with a team. You need to sort of think about what they need and shape their careers.
Imagine being in such high demand that not even Google could resist you, not once, but twice. Well, that's the kind of creative genius we have with us today. Welcome to the DesignRush podcast, where we bring you game changers who can help drive your business forward. I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. From his prestigious tenure at MoMA to co-founding Insights Plus Innovation at Google, our guest's journey has been a roller coaster of creative innovation. And now, he's taking on a new adventure as the head of creative at Notion, bringing his unique vision and experience to shake things up even further. Please welcome to the show, Rob Giampietro. So, Rob, you've obviously had an incredible journey thus far as a creative lead in many institutions, everywhere from MoMA to Google. Did you always know that this was the career that you wanted to pursue?
Oh, it's such a great question. I mean, in some ways, yes. I've been active as a designer since I was 14 years old. So, and always loved and actually fortunate enough to have kind of grown up in a world where design tools were on the computer. So kind of computing and designing have always been really deeply linked for me. And, been really, great to, I don't know what it would have been like to be a designer in the age of waxers and cameras, but I'm sure it would have led to some really different ways of thinking about design. But I've always thought about design kind of from a digital standpoint. And, that said, I was trained primarily in print design in college. And then I transitioned to making digital design as, the web really became more of a place for, expression and experimentation. I was teaching at Parsons at the time and started taking, you could teach one and take one. So it was like, I was teaching myself HTML and CSS while I was teaching, book design and typography on the other side. And I think, that quickly led into, I was working with a lot of cultural clients in my first agency. And, our focus was in clients in art, culture, fashion, that kind of place. And, a lot of them needed websites and a lot of them needed, quite scrappy, quick web projects or microsites or kind of project-based websites. And so it was a great way to kind of get my feet wet in making things digitally. But I think as that became, a 10-year practice, I started to get an itch for working at scale. And so it was really exciting when Google approached me about joining the material design studio in 2015 because there's no bigger scale than that. So, I mean, it was really, really fun to, get to go in and be New York based. So kind of get to be a site lead for the New York office of material design. It was just after material had been launched at I/O the year before. And so we were really trying to help people learn how to use it, learn how to implement it for Android apps, but also for other things. We had a web version of it that I was quite excited about in terms of being a web designer. And, we also wanted to do a lot of kind of storytelling about Google's own passion for design and the work that was happening at the company around design. So I led a series of initiatives that were design outreach initiatives. So we created a conference called SPAN, Conversations About Design and Technology, that popped up all over the world. We launched design.google and then also really gave a lot of thought to sort of how we could use material design components as a first party, in branded ways. So I was thinking a lot about the sort of intersection between product and brand. And then after about 3 or 4 years managing the team there, we had done a number of sprints with research and machine intelligence at Google. And, like any designer, and like any designer, I had thinking about what do AI-enabled components, look like, and like any designer, I was fascinated by that, and felt like that was work I could only do at the time. I could only do there. That's where AI was really being pioneered. Sure. And so I accepted an offer to go and be part of a sort of a tiger team that would unify all the UX folks across research and machine intelligence. There were little pockets of UX teams of 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. And the pitch was, let's unify all these folks and call it AI UX. And that team is still active at Google, but I was part of helping get it started, which was really fun. And it was about 9-10 months into helping get that team off the ground, helping get it staffed, everything else that MoMA called and was looking for a director of design to come and lead the creative teams there toward their historic reopening. They were going to expand MoMA by about 30% more gallery space. They were going to diversify the collection. There was a real mandate for change and sort of really thinking deeply about what the museum was all about. And it was just sort of an irresistible opportunity in terms of leadership, in terms of an institution that I really admired. And just being able to have a mandate for change in an organization like that, not just kind of keeping the lights on, but actually really driving a new experience of the collection, of modernism and of the collection forward. And so I was there for 2 years leading the creative team while we were in the midst of expanding the building and reopening, and kind of landed the reopening. And it was such an exciting project. I'm happy to go into any more of this in detail if you want, but
sure. Yeah.
But it was very exciting. And then kind of as we finished that project up, I think there was a natural kind of just sort of settling of energy. And I think I kind of felt like I'd been in the middle of a conversation at Google that I wanted to continue. It was really, that AI moment was so interesting to me. And, in a way I felt like MoMA was in good shape, and my team was more than capable of taking all the work that we had done and kind of continuing it. And so, I accepted an offer to come back to search an assistant and work in the consumer part of Google. So to try to apply some of the mixture of thinking horizontally in terms of all the design components, and also thinking kind of in a research lens in terms of all the AI futures, and then really landing those within product itself, within consumer products. So
you went from Google to MoMA and then back to Google again.
That's right. Wow. Yeah, I was what they call a boomerang Googler. So I boomeranged back around.
So does that mean that you were approached twice by Google?
I was, yes. I think there was a mutual feeling of not being done yet. So I was glad to get the opportunity to work on a great team under my VP Bobby Nath, and we really spun up a set of efforts that were aimed at the sort of 3 to 5 year planning window to say what could kind of consumer-wide experiences be like for Google. If we really applied the best designers and innovators and the best researchers and insights people together, what kind of experiences could we unlock? And so we were chasing a lot of those things for the last couple of years. And then when the layoffs happened, I think a lot of research teams and a lot of kind of speculative teams were impacted by those. We weren't owners of a product area, so it was natural to kind of think that was a place where you could tighten things up a little. And while I was really sad to say goodbye at that time, I think it also made sense to me, and I was really excited to kind of get my hands back into the leadership space again. And I had met Ivan and the folks at Notion about a year before through kind of a mutual friend who is a designer at Notion now on my team, Sam Baldwin, who had really helped get the creative studio at Notion started, and had moved to New York from SF, and was sort of looking to make connections in the New York design community. And we just had one of those beers that was it goes on for 3 hours, and you're like, this is really a new best friend, So, and I told Sam at the time that Notion had been something that was really emerging as a passion of mine. I had been introduced to it at MoMA. There was a young designer on my team at MoMA that was like, look at this. Wouldn't this be amazing to help organize our team? And we had just started working with Asana at the time, but, I was like, wow, what a cool tool. I'm going to try this out for myself. And I think as the pandemic happened and we were all stuck at home, I kind of was like, let me get my portfolio organized. Let me get my recipes organized. Let me get my garden organized. Let me get my wardrobe organized,
All of us were trying to organize our lives.
We were organizing our lives, and I think there was also all this incredible content happening where, people were showing what they could do in Notion, and it was really inspiring. I think all of my kind of web design, information architecture switches in my brain were lighting up, because here is a way of doing this, but without having to code it all. You could really do it in a very visually friendly and effortless way, in a way that I could easily collaborate with my wife or my contractor or whomever it was that we were working with. So it was a really fun tool. And at the same time, as I was seeing so many Googlers request access to it. Of course, it wasn't enabled within Google, but and then we were doing a lot of research around youth usage patterns online, and just sort of how is Gen Z using the internet on my team, kind of thinking about the future. And they were telling us also, like, this is a tool that we love and that we feel like kind of belongs to our generation. Like we want to be kind of the vanguards for bringing this to, not we're using it for our student life, we're using it for our personal life. We want to be vanguards for bringing this to the workplace. And so that really sort of opened my eyes, I think, to sort of the incredible push and scale of the community that Notion had brought together. And I think that's when kind of around the same time as I became available, the conversation restarted about joining forces and really working together to kind of scale the creative studio at Notion. So yeah, it's been so exciting. I've been here about 2 months, but it feels like it's been a long time, just because I've had a long relationship with the product, and I've had a long relationship with Ivan and Sam and the team. So it feels like it's been a really great fit. Yeah.
That's great. That's amazing. I mean, you've obviously gone through so much before. I mean, your track record is something to be in awe of, honestly. I think most people dream of being able to say these things that you've been through, and the career path that you've taken is just incredible. But what I just want to jump back a little bit before we get more into Notion and your career there. So I want to jump back to more about, like, when you were working, or when you were learning rather, to do development and design and all of that. Were there any like specific things that you had studied? I mean, I know you said you started at 14 already, which is, I mean, crazy and amazing. But was there a package of things that you really needed to hone in on to be approached by a giant like Google and MoMA and even Notion now? So, I mean, what would you say were the things that really set you up to get you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, there were two. Well, I wasn't lucky enough to sort of know in college that I wanted to study human-computer interaction. That course of study certainly existed. There were schools like Carnegie Mellon and other places offering it. I came to it sort of through work. I really I studied things at Yale that were like thinking about sequencing images, or what does it mean to sequence something, or which you can think of, in an app, you have to do lots of steps, you have lots of screens. So sequencing as a concept is very important. Or, just sort of creating visual hierarchy. Again, this is really important for helping lead a user through an interface. What is the thing that they're supposed to click? What is a secondary or tertiary option? And those kind of things. But I would say that, like, in this school, so there were lots of, I think I also was really, really interested in the history of technology and sort of how the computer emerged as a kind of important, force in our culture. And I really wanted to be a student of that. So I was learning a lot about, early days of IBM, early days of Apple, just trying to understand how did that history emerge, and I think those things are still relevant forces today, even as all the technological change happens. Sure. It's really good to be a student of history, and I find that to be an advantage in my work. But I would say the two biggest kind of like factors in terms of being able to do what I do, number one, were entrepreneurialism. Like, starting a studio at 23 was sort of, it just felt like something easy to do, but I don't think I had any idea how hard it would be. But when you take a leadership position like that and you're responsible for a bunch of people, you really come to take that very seriously. And I think that that's part of why Google called, was because of my time as a design leader, leading a team of about the scale and in the location that they needed a team to be led in. So that was one piece. I think the other piece was that I've been a teacher for a very long time. So I taught at Parsons, as I mentioned. I helped establish the branding program at SVA with Debbie Millman. Was part of the founding faculty there. And I was at RISD in the graduate graphic design program for 13 years, where I taught the thesis course. So that was sort of the final course that our master's degree students have to complete to get their degrees. And, you know, I think in teaching, you learn a lot about managing, you learn a lot about coaching, you learn a lot about different types of creative people and different ways of unlocking creativity, you know. And so I think it was the kind of combination of being entrepreneurial and being an educator, coach, that kind of made me successful at Google. And I think once that happened, there was a lot of possibility in terms of staying curious and staying hungry. That, you know, I didn't know anything about AI when I first got there. I was reading research papers and trying to understand what large language learning models were, just like everybody else, you know. But I was really, really fortunate to get a front row seat to doing it with some of the people that were inventing that stuff, you know. And so that just felt like the most nourishing place I could possibly be as someone who's a curious, passionate person, you know. So I'd say, like, it's just this mixture of kind of like, you know, leaping into things that are unknown and challenging and being confident that you can do them, trying to bring the best people with you and give them great opportunities, and then a little bit of just, you know, really, really deep curiosity and passion for learning, you know, and knowing that a designer's work is never done.
100%. That makes a lot of sense. And that's actually really, really good to keep in mind for sure. So, okay, just now getting back into Notion again. You kind of explained like what your history was with them or what your history is with Notion. I'm wondering though, like if you had to name one specific thing that initially attracted you to Notion, what was it?
You know, I think I had seen Marie Poulin, who's one of our kind of amazing Notion creators, show off some databases that she'd made about her garden. And, you know, it just seemed like a beautiful kind of use of Notion. And my wife and I were actually constructing a garden at our home upstate at the time. And so one of our many pandemic kind of projects. And we had gotten this long list of possible plants that we could add to the garden, and the different, like, you know, qualities of the plants, like when they bloomed, what color they were, whether they were shade or sun-seeking plants, like what the care was going to be like, how tall they would grow, you know, just all of these different, you know, properties of these plants, and what the care was going to be like what it was going to require, you know. So, and we couldn't make decisions about what to put in our garden. We were really having a tough time. And so I know that sounds like a silly problem, but really I just put it all in Notion. Like I put all the plants, the photos, the placements of that, likely placements of them, heights, and we were really able to just sort of imagine, like, okay, for the shade garden, these are low and they can go in front, and these are a little higher, you know. And the other project that it just was fun. Like, and I think we have this.
Exactly. It sounds like it's a really fun and like ideal way to use the Notion app for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I hadn't had, you know, I mean, Reminders is a great to-do list app, or like Asana is a great project management experience, but like I hadn't had that sense of fun with any of them. You know, they're really just very functional, and Notion's very functional too. But I think I was having so much fun. And another one that kind of like happened around a little later, I guess, was I had to cook my first Thanksgiving, as, you know, we were, you know, sort of sheltering at home. Sure. And I have one oven, you know, I've got lots of big ideas. I want to bake bread and, you know, do a turkey and do all these different things. And what are the recipes? What's my shopping list?
Yeah.
What's the oven temperature at various times of the day so that I can put different dishes in? And I Gantt charted it all out, which is the nerdiest thing I've ever heard of anyone doing. I think I'm going to put this on the template gallery because it's a pretty amazing Thanksgiving dinner template. But again, it was just one of those things. I really just wanted to use the tool. I just wanted to like play with it and see what it could do. And I kept coming up with these great kind of ways of modeling data in it that were really making it easy for me to sort of feel confident in kind of new situations, and also just have a lot of fun. So, yeah.
That's really cool.
The other thing I would say, just on a different angle, so that's a lot of the product side, but on the brand side, while I was at MoMA, I mentioned, you know, we had it was on our radar. We wished we could kind of use it, but it was not quite the right time to implement that tool. But we were sort of really inspired by the look of Notion, the kind of beautiful illustrations that Roman Muradov on my team does. You know, there's a lot of similar looking things right now, but it's hard to realize, like even a couple of years ago, how kind of singular and unusual Notion looked relative to other things in the space. And so we were really inspired by that. That was making us feel excited. It had this quality of like a timeless tool. The way that the New Yorker almost feels like a timeless magazine. That's like,
Yeah.
when was the New Yorker designed? It was designed by time, and Notion had that same quality of timelessness. And so we at MoMA we were actually rethinking our whole membership offering, and we wound up kind of doing some very Notion inspired illustrations for, what the experience of museum membership, different, families walking around the museum and illustrations of that. Turned out it was a friend of Roman's. We didn't know that at the time, but I guess we chose well as in finding his friend. So I would say super inspired by the brand as well as by the product.
Amazing. How nice that you actually were able to like switch over and actually work with them as well. So, okay. Also, just to ask this as well, like you've co-founded Insights and Innovation at Google, of course, as the director of design and as the director of design at MoMA. So how have these experiences played into your current role at Notion, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so the role at MoMA was really, a huge leadership challenge. You've got a team of lots of different types of creative people on a serious deadline for a, major global institution. And you've got 2 years and you've got to like land the plane, And so I think that was a real test of leadership. And I felt like my time at Google had prepared me for that. I think into in some ways, the 10 years before that in the cultural space had also prepared me for like what it's like to sort of run a studio in a fast moving way. But I think what Google helped me to do was think about, first of all, global brands, like brands with global recognition, like MoMA, one of the most iconic museum brands, I think, in the world. And then, and how to steward that brand, how to think about that brand, and how to sort of bring experience to that brand, what it could do in new ways. So, we even collaborated at MoMA with the material design team on the icons for our building. We have lots of international visitors at MoMA. They don't read English in all cases. So we made icons that were material design based with the material design team. So, thinking about screens or different things like that, every one of those muscles that came from Google was really helpful. But also navigating a large organization. MoMA is not quite the scale of Google, but thinking organizationally, thinking in terms of, what do different organizations need in order to effectively collaborate? How can I, as a department head, unblock and unlock, collaboration and creativity across not just my team, but multiple teams that need to work together, So I think that was it. I think when I came back to Google, I actually came back as an individual contributor. I had run a business. I had been led teams of growing sizes up to like about 30 at MoMA. Stewarded people's careers. And I just kind of wanted like some time to think about my own practice and my own craft. And so even though I, was ultimately became chief of staff of Insight and Innovation, working closely with my VP, I think it was a real kind of individual leading without authority kind of project. How do you kind of make sure the organization is performing really well as an agent that really kind of everyone wants to talk to? Your VP can share his, anxieties and also his hopes and dreams, and you can be a thought partner to executives and sort of in a way that helps them unlock what they want to manifest in terms of the organization. And then also for like the extended different players on the team, like how can you be a great collaborator with them and jam with them and help them lift them up and make them better in a way that where you're actually adding your own sweat equity and your own ideas to the mix. So I think it gave me a lot. That last role at Google gave me a lot more empathy for, what it's like to be an individual contributor on a complex, multidisciplinary team that's trying to sort of drive a transformational agenda. I think those two things really come together for me at Notion. I think the thing that I was hungry for coming into the Notion job was really to have a team again and to be a manager again. I think even though I was enjoying my little sojourn of individual contributorship, and I think it's actually important that design managers like re-up their skills, like reinvest in their own craft periodically throughout their careers. Our careers are long, hopefully. But at the same time, I think it was really fun to have a team again. And particularly like knowing Sam and admiring so much of Notion's output, knowing I was going to have a great team, and I think a lot of the kind of patterns I'm seeing at Notion right now are similar to the patterns I saw at MoMA, which is that there was really nothing wrong with the MoMA brand. I mean, it's a phenomenal brand. You'd be silly to kind of like throw it out the window and have the hubris to be like, I know better. It's really stewarding that brand. And I think a lot about something that the designer Virgil Abloh said all the time in my career, which is he talked this idea of 3% different, 100% better. That you can make these kind of, if you pick the right problems and you make kind of little adjustments and little kind of open up new ways of thinking, you can actually substantially improve like kind of the idea of what something, expand the idea of what something can be. And so, as we've introduced AI at Notion, we're expanding people's mental model of what the product is. I mean, it may have started off as kind of a seamless workspace, or a notebook, really, even before that, sort of a great notes tool, and then it's expanded into this seamless workspace with docs and wikis and projects. But I think the idea that like when you bring AI to that, you're not just sort of making it easier to write faster docs or like different change your sentiment in a doc or do proofreading in a doc or different things like that. You're actually unlocking like a whole new experience. And so the brand needs to kind of meet that moment and kind of evolve and maybe not radically rethink itself because it's something that people already love, but sort of figure out what are the new muscles it needs to build toward that end, And so I think that's kind of been a lot of the initial work we've started to do is thinking about how to communicate, the moment we're moving towards with AI, across all of the product and really like what is the Notion experience of that and how can the product deliver that.
So earlier you mentioned, I just want to get back to this. So earlier you mentioned leading without authority, right? Was that the right term that you used?
Yeah, leading without authority. Yeah. It's actually a book. I'm forgetting the author. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'd love to read it actually, but just to get back to that, what would you say that as a leader like that, trying to like lead without authority, as you're saying, what are the tips and tricks for doing something like that? Because I can imagine it must be a real balance with all kinds of people.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I wish I could remember the author's name, but the book is phenomenal. And I actually read it as I came back to Google. It's one of multiple books I read. I read the wonderful book $1 Trillion Coach about the guy who coached Steve Jobs and the Google founders and stuff like that. So because I was really interested in like what is an amazing coach like. But I also read this book called Leading Without Authority, and I think it was by a guy who had been a leader and then kind of moved into more of an advisory or kind of exec whispering role. And it was sort of like showed up with a lot of kind of opinions and kind of hubris about like how, he wanted to lead, his experience, his bio, his ego, those things. And it just didn't work. Like it didn't work at all because people were like, well, you're not my boss, Yeah. And so, actually Brooks is sharing with me that it's Keith Ferrazzi that was Leading Without Authority. So thanks for the assist. But anyway, in Keith Ferrazzi's book, he talks a lot about kind of his life as a executive and then transitioning to sort of a life as an individual contributor in a very senior level, and needing to kind of change the whole way he approached partnership because there wasn't the authority to kind of like set the table for what the partnership should be, and instead there needed to be a lot of curiosity about background, about the problem space that you shared, about the ways you wanted to move kind of together. So a lot of alignment, a lot of like building trust and capability, like what can you deliver as someone who's you're going to add complexity when you collaborate with someone. So what are you going to do to sort of unlock new capability with that complexity? So there needs to be an understanding of that too. So it's a really delicate art. And I would say it probably takes time to kind of build relationships with everyone and be an honest broker and a straight dealer with everyone, because you can't fall back on like, well, we just need to move in this direction because I said so, because you're just one person on the team. So I think it was, it's really taking the time, building the relationships, creating shared terrain that you both want to co-own and steward together, and then having a skill set that people feel like is additive ultimately.
Exactly. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. But as you say, I think it is a very delicate process that definitely takes time and relationship building for sure. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So also, what would you say are the biggest challenges facing creative professionals today?
Oh, it's a great. I mean, I think there's a whole mix of them. I mean, I think it depends on like whether you're thinking about in-house teams or agency teams. I think they're quite different circumstances. But from the vantage point of an in-house team, which is certainly where I've been for the last little while, I think the design. I remember there was a time where kind of like you would do the design and then you would show the three options, and people would kind of pick one. And now design is a much more kind of multidisciplinary, multi-person, fluid, and constantly evolving process. And so I think, one of the things that's challenging for young designers in their careers is kind of becoming acclimated to that sense that design is never done. Design is not always theirs. And so, being able to see themselves in the output of the team, even if they don't sort of own and author that output, is something I think that's important at an early stage in your career. I think there's an important point for a lot of designers about, do they want to manage a team, which is going to mean less creative output on their own, or do they want to kind of become exceptional senior contributors? And I think that there should be, like as I said before, some fluidity with that. I think that it's not like a forever decision, but I certainly think the muscles to lead a great creative team are somewhat distinct from the muscles of being a great senior creative. They're not necessarily the same muscles. You need to be an amazing kind of coach. You need to really care a lot about people. You need to not always sort of have your own problems and your own needs first when you're working with a team. You need to sort of think about what they need and shape their careers. So I feel like, there really is a generosity of spirit that comes with, choosing to manage. And that's something that I always talk a lot about with designers that I've worked with who've been thinking about that transition. I think on a more kind of like technological level, I mean, as I mentioned, like I was from when we were going from paste down and waxing to, desktop publishing. So that was, design has seen many technological transitions. I think a huge one that of recently is really like Figma and being able to design in the browser and having everyone have access to design tools and be able to work collaboratively. That is an incredible tool. We love using Figma at Notion. But I think, the idea of AI-enabled design is also, I think, as it is with every creative profession, something that is on everyone's mind. I think it's really about, in my mind, like augmenting human intelligence, and being able to take the things that are really laborious for a designer right now, like, oh my gosh, we changed this component. Now we've got to go back and center it in every single version of this layout. And we've got to they want to see what the dark mode looks like. Okay, now we got to go render all those. It's like, if with a little bit of AI, you can take a lot of that drudgery away. And I think we see the same thing at Notion where, with a little bit of AI, you can take a lot of creative drudgery away. I'm a pretty creative person. I love to write. I write creative briefs all day and brief my team. I had a guy on my team come to me and he's applying for an apartment. And he's like, can you write a letter, like a landlord letter for me? That's just sort of a employer reference. And,
Sure.
I did the thing that everyone does and says, sure, tell me what you want it to say. And so it sort of gave me a couple of bullets. I added a couple more bullets about how great he is. And I just said, hey, Notion AI, I need a letter. It needs to be professional in nature. It needs to come from me as his boss. And here's a couple of bullet points I want to include. And, Notion AI spat that thing out for me while I was literally on the train, on the weekend. It was just an unbelievable unlock of just being able to get him what he needed quickly in a way that, didn't require a lot of creativity from me, but the effect of it was far greater than, the effort. And I feel like those are the kind of moments that are really amazing and profound. So, a colleague of mine at Notion was telling me about, adding some summaries. We have these great AI summary properties. She was telling me about adding a summarization property to a kind of a wiki that we had. And, and just looking for, really finding the answer she was looking for in the summary property without even kind of needing to ask for it. Like it had pulled out some of the most salient details. And the team didn't need to go hunting for this. It already was right there. And, instead of reading a long doc and parsing it, you have a 5-sentence summary that you can get the answer. So those sort of things, like, really, I think, go with the Notion story of really making you feel like you're not working and just working, you're working and you're playing. You're not wrestling with the tool and learning how to use it. The tool is so well crafted and so thoughtfully crafted that it's really easy to use. And you feel like you have wings on your back. And so, hopefully that's sort of the moment that AI is bringing us right now. With a lot of caveats, with a lot of, we want to be eyes open and we want to be thoughtful as a society. But I think that, first and foremost, in terms of the way it's going to change tools and tool making, which is something that we really care about, I think those are the ways I can see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in that sense, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and that's by making your life easier, isn't it? Like, it's just making everything so much more productive and seamless, and that's incredible. That's exactly what you want from it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I remember reading, reading a little bit about Alan Turing at Bell Labs in New Jersey. So this is sort of like many years ago, kind of early computing history. Alan Turing, of course, really, really important mathematician and kind of someone who established the whole idea of a computer. And he was talking about kind of early ideas of artificial intelligence as being something that could really help with the kind of drudgery of work, something that could really, take a lot of the things that they were wrestling with as a kind of like engineering department in a large kind of, Bell Labs, a large kind of, telecom business, and like really just kind of reducing a lot of the drudgery of that. And wouldn't it be great if you had an intelligence sort of at the level of a middle manager that could kind of write these memos and summarize these things. And so in a lot of ways, I think this idea has really been there for a while, and it's really about like, what is the best way to unlock it, And, when Notion saw ChatGPT and sort of those things coming out last November, I think they really wanted to think as quickly as possible about how can we put this in the hands of our users. So we had the AI Alpha last November. I think a lot of people don't realize how early we were, and how I think we were able to sort of like give people a really hands-on and easy to use version of that thing that really helped them with the problems they were trying to solve within their own, personal or team-based workspaces. I think then we followed with more of a general access version of it in February. And, a lot of those were writing-based things. But then with the project's launch, we've got all of these AI-enabled fields so that you can summarize, pull out key info, or even write your own prompts to like pull out important information from your databases. So I think there's a real great momentum we've got going, where we've got a lot of users already using AI every day and seeing some great benefits from it.
So I want to talk a little bit more about your career at Notion and building a remote workspace particularly as well. So obviously Notion was already on the rise a few years ago, but the possibility of remote work boosted its growth, of course. So what role does a connected workplace like Notion play in the life of a remote worker, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, like so many of us, I was remote, working from home when COVID-19 hit, and we had so many conversations back in Google days about, how to gather our team. Do we need a water cooler? Like, what are the different ways of kind of unlocking creativity in a remote setting? And I think at Notion, we think a lot about, synchronous versus asynchronous communication. I think it's really good to kind of make that distinction. So, synchronous communication is real time, it's email, it's messaging, it's kind of flowing all the time, it's video calls and things. I think, we think Zoom and Slack and other, there are so many great workplace tools for those kinds of requirements for synchronous communication in the remote setting. But I think, Notion is super great for the asynchronous collaboration. And I think what that means is that, while we all have Zoom fatigue, or we all kind of like, maybe don't want to be chatting all day because it's distracting us, I think, you can collaborate with a colleague halfway around the world on a dock and really be working together to capture and collaborate, and and hopefully not just write that doc in a standalone way, but really have it be networked across your entire workspace so that it's sort of additive to lots of people's efforts and understanding of the different problems your team is trying to solve. So, I think that asynchronousness and the kind of remote collaboration without being real time, there are definitely settings where real time is better, but I think there's a lot of settings where we don't need real time, and the asynchronous collaboration with a lot of enhancements that Notion can bring is really phenomenal. So that's one piece of it. I think the other thing is it's when you give people these tools, we're really we want to make tool making ubiquitous. What does that mean? It's well, you can use Notion in a myriad of ways. It's not super prescriptive about that. And so that means that if you have a little bit of creativity, you can actually spin up some very interesting, use cases. I talked about my Thanksgiving, database or whatever, but let's talk about more collaborative things. In the wake of George Floyd's terrible murder, I remember seeing this incredible Black Lives Matter database on the internet is widely shared. It was all built in Notion, and it was built by people that didn't really even know each other in many cases, who were all able to contribute to this in a way that was sort of easy for them to understand, easy for them to contribute to, and really, really valuable for those of us that were trying to learn a lot more about what we could do as allies and advocates. So I think that's a really fantastic kind of these use cases that you can't predict, that people spin up on their own is also, I think, really amazing and something to spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually a really heartwarming thing to hear, that Notion was used for. That must have felt really good to know that you worked on something that enabled activists and stuff to be able to gather together from all around, and really work together.
Totally. I heard a similar story from a colleague on my team who was telling me about a friend of his that's a surgeon and has a surgical knots database publicly available that's all based on Notion. So you can, if you're a medical school student or something, you can go learn from an amazing surgeon about how to tie these different surgical knots and the proper uses of them and all. And you probably could find that in the textbook, but what isn't it cool to be able to have so many different people contributing to that kind of knowledge together? So, and I think we have this incredible, we have 1 million plus vibrant global community. Most of the people, the profitability of Notion comes internationally too. So it's really a global community. And so I think there's just an incredible, the thing that happens when you have people from so many different, parts of the world and parts of life, collaborating in whether it's within the enterprise or teams or kind of more generally as individuals. I think that just is an incredible setting. So
amazing. Yeah, exactly. That's really amazing. So Notion serves as both next generation startups and established enterprises like Nike and Amazon. So how do its solutions differ for these kinds of companies?
Well, I mean, we have fantastic admin tools. So if you need to be able to have, more customized tools as someone who's managing an enterprise version of Notion, we have those and we're building more all the time. I mean, I think it's worth noting that half of Fortune 500 companies are using Notion. 90% of Forbes, Cloud 100 startups. So really cloud leaders. And really importantly for us, half of the Y Combinator batches or classes are using Notion. So this means startups are using Notion. So the companies of tomorrow are using Notion as well as they scale. And so it's really, really important to us to sort of occupy, those different spaces and be a tool that can scale to many of those different applications. It's used by 20 million different people and teams of tens of people and hundreds of thousands of people, and across 50 countries. It's just a really amazing, a really amazing tool. So I think, but we do have some great use for enterprise and for larger users. You can really scale it to the size that you need. You can enable AI for your entire enterprise, or just sort of focus on more giving access to select team members and things like that. So I think really the value prop that we're seeing more and more is this ability to kind of take a lot of unitasking tools, or sort of, the tool chain of an average business is around 89 different tools, like enterprise tools. This was from a 2023 recent survey that companies are using around 89 different tools. No one can master 89 different tools. It keeps teams from being kind of not collaborating because they're using different tools. People are burned out because now they have to learn another tool. There's a lot of duplication of like, you've got to paste your updates from here and this other thing. You're switching context between all those different 89 tabs that you have, so I think the idea of Notion is really just sort of like, can we stop the madness? Let's consolidate some of these things. These aren't really hard or special uses. Like, they're really the basics of computing, like input fields and relational databases and sort of network knowledge. These are things that have been with us for a long, long time. We're really inspired by, innovators like Doug Engelbart, who have, back in the 60s, we're demoing a lot of these kind of incredible uses of computers that have, I'm sure, inspired many tools, but I think we want to be a tool that's for tool making and for, any use that an enterprise might need. So, when you go on the template gallery, you can find thousands of different templates for almost any use you could imagine. It's really, really incredible. And a lot of times when I'm working kind of in my own Notion workspace, I'll use a template from the template gallery from one of the, creators that you might have seen on YouTube, or even just like someone that you don't know that has just done an amazing job. You can take like my current CRM database for staying in touch with friends. Very simple. It's just from the Notion template gallery, and it helps me remember to call my college roommate on a more regular basis, or kind of, it helps me think a lot about, what are the relationships I really want to invest in this quarter or this year, sort of make sure that I'm more present as a friend or something like that. So I think in being able to sort of not have to buy a tool and have that friction point for, do I need this CRM tool to do that? Or really, I'm just trying to track a bunch of people and kind of add some actions to that set of people. That is an amazing thing. And yes, there's always going to be a need for something like Salesforce. When you're at a certain level, you might need a special tool to reach that level. But I think that for many, many businesses, I think this is really particularly why the startup use case is so interesting to us for engineering and product design teams. They are just scaling, and the use cases are not even yet defined. And so they're able to sort of build the tools they need without the friction of subscriptions and costs. They're able to centralize those things in Notion. And I think that's been a huge value add for them.
Exactly. So, okay, what would you say are the building blocks, or which building blocks does Notion use in the process of creating an effective remote workplace?
Yeah, I think we always tell people, we just launched this incredible new set of projects databases, and I think what we've been hearing from our users was that users were using Notion for project management. It was doing a good job, but sometimes different teams would spin up different processes for products, and our users in our community really wanted to know how does Notion use, what's Notion's recommendation? Is there a way that we could just sort of have a really easy starting point? And so the new projects databases are really just that if you're getting started in Notion, maybe you're not someone that's as familiar with information architecture as I am, you can just click that you want a project. Do you want to have sprints in it? Do you want to have unique identifiers? Are there any AI properties that you might want to add to this to make your life easier? You can do all of that kind of very quickly and get these things set up in a way that is standardized across your enterprise, and so, or across different teams you're working with. So I think that's one of the ways that we've seen make that easier.
In that same kind of sense as well, I know workplace tools can complicate the efficiency of remote work. When would you say do workplace tools cause productivity drains as opposed to productivity booms, and what should users look out for in those cases?
Yeah, I think that certainly the number of tools is one of the things that we've talked a lot about, that kind of the drain on just the fragmentation problem, and so consolidation can create creativity, but I don't think that you can get it from consolidation alone. I think that there's also something to be said for the seamlessness of Notion's workspace. So what I mean by that is that like instead of your docs living in a program that's just for docs, and your sheets living in a program that's just for sheets, you're able to pull exactly the row that your doc is talking about in the place where that's happening. And so the canvas and the seamless workspace really enables knowledge to flow through teams in ways that's not siloed to the document type or the kind of artifact type that the team might be log information in, but rather allows them to pull it up fluidly and reference it right in place. And so I think as you start to unlock creativity in terms of how stories are told, how persuasion happens, it's not just the creativity of it's not just like sort of reducing the fatigue, but it's sort of enhancing the creativity because people are able to pull information and point to it where they need it. And they're also able to sort of create the templates that are bespoke to their use case. So, I remember that, when I was, designing websites for museums and things like that, a lot of them had custom software that was, for donor management. And the only difference between that software and something like a Salesforce is because instead of customer, it said donor in the field, And it just broke my heart that they were using inferior software, terrible software with bad UI that they didn't like using simply because they felt they had to because it didn't map to their mental model of what they were trying to do. So I would argue that actually limits their creativity too. And, that there needs to be a way to kind of allow teams ownership of not just the data they have, but the structure of that data and the right way for that data to flow through their team to make decisions about it and collaborate. And so I think that's the other piece, is that Notion gives you that control. And the last thing is, like, we really try hard, and I think Brand does a lot on this, to make it a delightful and fun and charming tool for you to use. We think a lot about that. I was just in a meeting with our CEO, Ivan, the other day, and he was like, let's make sure we stay fun. Like, we really don't, like, this is important. Everybody, pay attention to the fun options here that the creative team is presenting, because this is what we're about. This is what people love about us. And I just don't, I think that's something that people can feel when that craft comes through, and it makes them want to play and build. And it makes them really want to, try to do something, because it feels like there's love behind the product that is kind of that they're using. There's really intense amounts of craft there. And so I think that's something that, like, maybe to help lift people's creativity to even more heights, we're really going to focus on that in the next little bit. We really want to show love to all areas of our product. I mean, yes, we're building some cool AI stuff, more on that soon, but like, I think there's also some great features that we want to that are just about craft and tuning things so that the community just loves using them every day. I mean, we all have that bag that feels like it's just right for, the thing we're carrying, or, that wallet we just love to touch because it's so beautiful. And I think software can be like that too. Like, we really think software can be beautiful. We've made billboards about this, and that, I think that's a message that really inspires me as a designer. I mean, I think you can feel as a designer when your craft is valued at a company too. And that's why so many people on our team are so excited about being there. And when I hear from designers all the time, they're like, how can I work at Notion? It's very cool to hear that, so. Yeah, we post a lot on LinkedIn. We're hiring. There's lots of jobs. Check out our greenhouse listings. But yeah, we're definitely still growing, and it's very exciting times.
Amazing. That's really cool. So I'm not sure if you know this, but we at DesignRush host a complete directory of creative agencies around the globe. What would you say are some of the major benefits of outsourcing creative work?
Wow. Well, I always think about, like, is this something that is enterprise, like domain specific knowledge about, does it require a high degree of collaboration with an in-house team, or have we documented our knowledge here in a way that we can externalize it and sort of engage, like, folks that maybe have the craft ability, but they don't need the sort of situational context, or it's not an ever-changing scope or things like that. So I think this is really something that, like, I'm focusing on right now, is sort of how do we build our bench of great agencies and contractors and collaborators for our creative team, and really zeroing in on what are the right projects to do that with. It might be something that's far away from where you are, like if you're trying to activate a conference or a remote event. It might be something that's outside your domain expertise. So, there's lots of amazing motion designers in the world, but not every team needs one on call at all times. Sometimes you just need optionality. You just need someone with a different energies. Maybe if you've got a lot of very sort of structured and typographically driven designers, you might need someone who's more of an image maker, or who can really sort of be fluid in Photoshop or something like that can unlock a new avenue of exploration for your team. So, yeah. Or sometimes you need designers who are storytellers, who want to think about words, sequences, arguments, and sort of use design to do that. So it always depends, I think, on the context. But I think what an in-house team really wants to be is they want to be both stewards of the brand on an ongoing and enduring basis. They're evergreen. That's like why they're there every day, And they also want to be pushing the brand forward in ways that take a long time and require a lot of conversations from a lot of different people internally in a kind of ambiguous and evolving way. And so I think when you're ready to sort of externalize those things is when you really have those problems defined, and you know that you need a particular set of skill sets that's going to augment your team to get that done. And so that's kind of how I think about it a lot. And I think you can be very strategic about it. There were projects at Google, for example, that my team, we did a yearbook every year for Search and Assistant that was just sort of highlights of like the greatest projects and all the wonderful people on our team.
Sure.
We gave it away as a gift. It was an internal gift at the end of the year. And then some of the designers on my team were like, I really want to design the yearbook. It's so cool. And it was like, of course I wanted to let them design the yearbook. And if they really wanted to stay up nights and weekends, they could. But like their domain knowledge around search was not something we could buy in the marketplace. Like that existed only with them. So, as much as they wanted to sort of flex their muscles as a book designer, we really needed them on search, So I think that's the other thing, is just like letting the subject matter expertise kind of guide, and the business need really guide your decision making on that.
Yeah, sure, exactly. Those are really good points, actually. So, okay, just going into the conclusion of our interview or our podcast now. You've said that artificial intelligence is one of the big things to look out for in creative work, and described it as the frontier for capability and understanding. So how is the introduction of AI taking Notion to the next level? You've already mentioned some of the stuff, but how would you say maybe 2-3 top things?
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, I use that word frontier very, very thoughtfully and very consciously, because, I think if you look at the history of AI, AI is a term that's been with us for a long time. Often what happens is that things that are called AI when they're hard or difficult problems, as they get solved, they have more natural, different names. So sure. Things like auto completion in a search box is really just a prediction of what you're going to type. That is AI, but we don't call it AI anymore. We just call it autocomplete, And so I think that it's a frontier that kind of continues to move as technology catches up. And so AI is always, I think, going to be something that we can't quite reach in a certain way. But certainly large language models I think it's important to be precise about what particular AI things you mean. Like at Google on the AI team, there were teams working on transformers and large language models. My team in particular was working on computer vision and sort of figuring out how to apply computer vision on device. So that's a very different domain than large language models, which is what we're really focused on at Notion in terms of writer and things like that. But I think that in terms of your question, I think where we see the opportunity there is in some of this large language work around summarization, around helping you write, translating things for you, helping you maybe sometimes you don't even know how to start a project. You're like, what do I even need to do? What do people usually do when they start a budgeting process? I'm at a loss. Even the example I gave of writing a kind of employer letter, it's how do I start this letter? How do I get started? And I think AI is amazing at that because it's a great predictor. It might not give you the most interesting or kind of original suggestion, but it's going to give you a very common starting point. And then you can nuance it at the very least. Totally. And then you can nuance it and inflect it from there however you want. So I think that it's definitely going to help us with creativity. It already is with AI Writer. It's definitely going to help us with kind of routine, finding answers in different ways and routine kind of summarization tasks that help keep teams up to date. I think what we get excited about at Notion is because of the seamlessness of the workspace, because of the way that all of your teams are working together and all of your knowledge is sort of hopefully flowing into Notion, and even being able to bring in knowledge from lots of other tools like Figma and other, great tools, your pitch decks from Pitch or whatever. It can all be in one place, and then you can start to sort of find patterns and new knowledge to act on from that collection of things. So I think we get really excited about that, and really a lot of the ways that predictive intelligence works is through kind of the strength of relationships within kind of a networked space. So if you're a Notion user and you're saying, hey, this is a highly relevant document, like lots of documents are pointing to this document. So assume that this is a great source of truth, and maybe give other, sort of client teams some of these bullets as a starting point for their processes or something like that. You can start to see how that can get really exciting in terms of unlocking new ways of working together.
It is super exciting. I think, there's been a lot of debates around AI and in various industries really at the moment. But I do think it's very exciting. I mean, of course, there has to be safeguards put in place around AI. There's no question about that. But at the end of the day, the possibilities really are endless. And I think it's so cool that Notion has been incorporating this into its app for a while now, and it's great. It's really amazing what it's capable of and what your team has been capable of doing with that. So just lastly, Rob, what advice could you share with professionals looking to push creative boundaries in the corporate world today?
Oh my goodness. Never stop learning, I think, is one of my buzzwords. I think if there's anything that's kind of made there's a lot of things about design that don't change. A lot of things of okay, we're making a type system, or we're rebranding something, or we're solving a messaging challenge or whatever. But the more you learn about the problem space that you're working in, the more that you broaden yourself as a leader. I'm starting to learn a lot about our sales team right now. And I've never worked with a SaaS sales team like this, and it's just absolutely inspiring to me to understand and learn from them, how they work with our product and how they work with our customers. I just think you have to be hungry for knowledge, and for design to truly be a problem-solving discipline, you need to sort of love the problems and be interested in the problems and find ways to sort of open the problems up for yourself creatively. And that really often requires just being curious and hungry and wanting to learn a lot about them. So, to me, I'm so grateful that my journey has led me to all of these different types of industries, ways of practicing, nonprofit, Fortune 500, startup, my own startup in terms of an agency, different things like this. It's just been incredibly rewarding, but it isn't necessarily a linear path, and a lot of it is guided by my own curiosity and being a lifelong learner.
100%. Okay, that's very cool. So Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. This has been such a nice conversation.
Oh yay, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And that's it for today's episode. If you're looking for a creative or AI agency for your project, we're here to help. Visit designrush.com/marketplace. Our marketplace offers a curated selection of agencies that can provide the solutions you need to turn your dream project into a reality. Again, I'm your host, Bianca Mayer. Stay curious and join us for the next episode.